Hey, welcome to the Rally Point. I'm Pastor Wes Pennington, and we're just so thankful that you're here today with us at the Rally Point. And I'm excited today because I got a good friend, a brother of mine that's going to come on, Dan Whitted, who's a soldier. He's a soldier. He was a soldier in the Army or the Marines. He can tell you when he comes on, and he's also a soldier for God. And we're going to just have a conversation today about fatherhood and all the things that entails for the man of God. So I hope you enjoy it. But let's bring Dan in and let's welcome Dan to the Rally Point. Hey, Dan, what's up, man? Welcome to the Rally Point.
How you doing, Pastor West? Thanks for having me.
Amen, amen. Hey, I screwed that up, man. So were you a Marine or you Army?
I was in the Marine Corps, and I won't hate on my Army brother because I love your brother. I won't talk about specific things.
I was just thinking, I was like, oh, he's a Marine. I just assaulted him. That's okay. Hey, so welcome, man. Welcome to the Rally Point. Glad to have you in, man, because, we just try to have conversations every week, different conversations about just, manhood and, what all the different things that, we as men of God have to go through. And, tonight I want to kind of, talk to you about fatherhood. I know you're a father, you got two sons, and the struggle of trying to raise them up in a world that's kind of going crazy in a sense, with social media and schools and everything that goes on in the world. What's your thoughts on how do we raise young men in a world that's going on today?
So, like we were joking about backstage. So I've got four sons. I'm in a blended family, and I stepped into a situation where my wife had two older sons. So I've got a 22-year-old son who's actually, I'm going to be a grandfather in May. So I'm going to take on that as well. But I've got a 22-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 14-year-old, an 11-year-old, all boys. Wow. And then I've got an about to be 10-year-old daughter. So
wow.
I've got it from all shapes and sizes. And honestly, taking on the role with teenage sons, just jumping into it was tough. And having to kind of just jump right into the frying pan and into the heat, I was, to be honest, not ready for it. And I was just talking to my 22-year-old the other day, trying to give him the best advice I could on fatherhood. And I realized in that moment that I really didn't know a whole lot and that no one size fits all. And I told him, and it was one of the more honest conversations that I've been able to have with him, is that I made a lot of mistakes with him and his brother because they were older. And that's a very unique dynamic when you're coming and you're not their biological father. Their biological father is very much involved in their lives, and trying to find my place, not overstep, but be there, not be too lenient, but, be parental. And,
Right.
I'll be completely honest. My wife and I have struggled with it for a while. We still haven't quite ironed it out. It's just, it's an evolving thing. And the little ones, I think now are more challenging than the older two because of the generational things that are going on right now. And the questions, like I was joking with you about before, that I get asked on the rides home from school. Sometimes I tell them I got to get back to you on that. I got to think about that. I pray about that. I got to figure out how I'm going to respond, because Pastor Frank, actually, he hit me hard the other day when he was talking about what would happen if you had a transgender situation at home, or, your son or daughter decided to have a sexual orientation that was against what we believe and all those things. And, we all some of us take a more hardline stance than others. And, I'm not going to get into that debate right now because that's for another time and place. But what he really said that struck me was Jesus may not be there as a religious figure, but he'd be there because he loves you.
Amen.
And,
Amen.
that really hit me to the core, because, certain things that, we believe in, certain things we don't believe in, certain things, are biblical, certain things aren't biblical. And, we can all go read the Bible. We could talk about that, but dealing with this day and age and what I feel is kind of, I don't want to call it an indoctrination, but a forced education. I'll say. And dealing with that is tough because we're up against it. If you go and you complain and you say, hey, why don't I have a say in what my child gets taught at school? Why don't I have a say in this curriculum? Why don't I get to participate? Why don't you send out surveys? Well, sir, you have a problem with this, or and then you get labeled things.
Right.
And, it's tough because when my sons go, Dad, why didn't my teacher get mad at me because I asked a question about boys and girls? Why I have to label somebody something, and I believe there's boys and girls, Dad, and that's what I think my teacher got mad at me for. And those are very, very tough things for me to answer because I don't want to ever have my children believe that you should hate anybody because of something. Right. And you don't know what goes into that. And there's if we're being real about it, a lot of times there's a lot of trauma that goes into those situations, and there's a lot of things that are way below the surface that we don't quite understand. And I don't want to teach my children to judge. I don't want to teach them to label people. I don't want to teach them to not love people. And I get a lot of pushback on those things, and it's tough for me as a parent and tough for me as a man because I feel like we're kind of up against it. If if we're too masculine, then it's toxic. If we're not masculine enough, then we're in another box. And discipline our children, then DCYF wants to come take them. But if we don't discipline our children, then we're neglectful. And I could go on and on about the struggles that I've had.
I think you kind of hit something on the head when you said that it's about loving them, and loving them no matter what, and in your case, being in a blended family where you have two sons that came from your wife's marriage, a separate marriage than what you're in, and then two sons that came from a situation that you were in, right? And then you're trying to not be their dad because they have a relationship with their biological dad, but you're an adult in the house, you're a man in the house, so there's a responsibility, still a role that you have to play there, and I think when young men first see a man that's actually walking the walk, you know what I mean, he's walking the walk, he does what he says, and he says what he's going to do, and he does it, he follows through, and and then just kind of pouring out love on them, you know what I mean, no matter what happens, no matter what they do. Now, I think the problem is that a lot of times we see love, or we think about love, and it's always gentle and gushy and sweet and nice, right? But sometimes love is actually telling somebody that they're wrong when they're wrong. Sometimes love is actually being honest with someone when they need to hear the honest truth about something. That's loving them. You know what I mean? And we misuse that word at times, I think, especially when it comes to fatherhood. And we label dads, like you said, if I'm being honest with you, and I'm just telling you the truth, that I'm being tough, I'm being too rough, I'm being overbearing. When the truth is that I'm just trying to protect you. I'm trying to to help you because I love you. And that's a struggle for us. But I mean, the good thing that we have, is that we do have, Jesus Christ, and we do have him as an example. And that was a good example that Pastor Frank stated, that, Jesus would love him through it. Because I think through the love, the faith will come, because that's who God is, and for us, it's tough too, right? Because I don't know your full story. I know a lot of your story, but I don't know like the fullness of your story in reference to your relationship with your dad, right? So if you didn't have a great relationship with your dad, then you had kind of a bad example of what father is. So now you're a father and you're trying to kind of figure this thing out and trying to work through this thing and trying to, but without really having a good example on what that looks like, and thank God we have God the Father who we can look at, and say, okay, here's what a good father looks like. And obviously we can't measure up to that because he's God, but we can try and we can struggle. And I know that you've had some struggles in those areas.
So yeah, and just I'll clear the air, and I have no problem discussing this because it's something that I think is important to recognize. My father was a very bad alcoholic and struggled tremendously with alcohol abuse, and to the point. And the one thing that I can say is he never lied to me. I can never remember a situation where my father lied to me. He was always very honest, and when I talk to people about, they're like, well, you know what, not to do. Well, true. I had a whole toolbox from both of my parents of what not to do. But the problem with knowing what not to do is you never learn what to do.
Exactly.
So yes, I had a whole lot. You don't get drunk and throw your kids down concrete steps. Check that box. Don't leave your kids for extended periods of time and go on vacations and not let your kids know where you are. Check that box. Great. All right. But in situations that are tough for when your kids get to those critical ages, that those very early on ages where they need the nurturing, and then they get to the other stages where they want to be independent but don't really know a lot, that teaching, but like you said, being tough and honest, but also that love. And then as they progress into young men and young women, treating them like adults, but also understanding that they don't know how to be adults yet. And a lot of this process for me has been understanding that what I expect my kids to know from my experience is wrong, because my existence was based on experience that a lot of, and I'll normal, there's no such thing as normal, but for that typical family unit, I didn't experience those things. And I had a whole lot of life experience that normal kids don't know.
Right.
And, so when I assume that my children know things because I knew that, it was completely wrong. And so now I've gotten a little wiser and a little older and a little bit more patient. Now I go back and I say, okay, hey, this isn't the right way to do this. And this is how you do it. And now it's more of a teaching and explaining and a learning and an interaction and a conversation versus why didn't you know that? What's wrong with you? Why are you doing it like that? And they're looking at me, like they don't know because they don't know.
Right.
And it was tough for me to wrap my head around that, because it's like, how did you know this? Oh, because they didn't grow up in a traumatic childhood. And, I look at it from the wrong standpoint, which is you should know this too. The only reason you know that is because you had to raise yourself.
Right.
And when I started looking at it like that, I noticed that my patience level grew tremendously. And again, I'm not going to get on here and preach like I've got it all figured out, or I've not made mistakes. I've made a ton of mistakes as a father, and I'm not, and I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say, hey, it was me. I messed up. I did that wrong. I did a lot of things wrong. I still do. But
yeah, we all have, and I mean, also what we got to look at too, and it's not an excuse or anything, but generationally, you know what I mean? So, our fathers looked at fatherhood differently than how we look at fatherhood, you know? And when I was a kid, if dad put clothes on your back, you had a roof over your head, food in your belly, that was a good father, right? But the nurturing, the time spent together, the fostering of relationship with each other, that wasn't important. At least it didn't seem as though it was important, But then I see, other kids that were my age whose fathers were in their lives that were kind of really kind of vital in their upbringing and their growth. And you can see the difference in them later in life, a lot more stable, a lot less issues, and, just being able to deal with life a lot better, So we have kind of a unique advantage where, we can look at fatherhood from different points of view. And I like what you said that, and I believe it was a revelation for you to kind of come to a place where you're like, you know what, I'm looking at this thing wrong. I'm looking at it from a perspective of being mistreated. And because I knew that, they should know that. But they're not mistreated. They actually have a good father who's there, loving them and looking to pour into them. So they're totally clueless to it. You know what I mean? And which is a good thing. But yeah, that was a revelation for you, man.
it was, and we we'll never really quite figure this thing out because life's going to throw curveballs at us. And, I don't know where my kids are going to be in 5 years. And, I know they're going to be a little bit older and their problems are going to be different. And, it's a challenge. And for me, it's trying to grow myself and understand what's going on around, in the world, because they're dealing with different worldly things than we had to deal with. And although, when we were children, those problems were the biggest problems in the world. Looking back, it's an ant on Mount Everest. But, at the time, those are the biggest problems there are. And now I look at it and I try to keep myself aware and educated as to what's going on in their world. Because when you lose touch with that kind of stuff, then it's, you give the cliche, don't listen to them, ignore them, sometimes you can't. And, in this world of social media and all that, you can't get away from them with the TikTok and the Facebook and the Instagram and, the Snapchat, and everywhere they turn, there's something that could affect them and that could, possibly cause them great embarrassment or, whatever the case may be. It's not like, Billy and Joey calling each other when we were kids on three-way. Now it's tweets and this and that. And within 5 minutes, 1,000 people are looking at something, and, it could be devastating quickly. So just trying to.
Within a couple of minutes, your whole school could know about a situation. You know what I mean? It's crazy how fast it gets around. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the amount of pressure that are on, this younger generation now is just amazing. We could hide when we were in high school because, it took a little while for stuff to get around. People had to actually be in school talking to each other. And maybe by the end of the day,
by the time it went off and they found the payphone, you could get ahead of it a little bit.
Exactly. But now within a couple of minutes, everyone can know about it. So these kids are definitely having to deal with some stuff that we didn't have to deal with, which is going to mean that we're going to have to be a little bit more sensitive to their environment and more sensitive to their issues. As fathers.
As fathers as well, I think it's our job to educate them on the consequences of that stuff as well. I have a lot of conversations with my boys and definitely my daughter about how quickly that can affect them in a negative way, just as, and also the don't live for likes thing. It doesn't matter how many people like something on social media. It's, are you being true to you? Are you doing the right things? Are you making the right judgments? Are you being respectful? And all those things that I try and use examples of, when they show me videos and stuff. And I try not to condemn them for showing me things because I understand they're kids. And sometimes they don't understand fully what's going on, or, they find humor in things that maybe they shouldn't. But I like that they come to me and they show me these things and I can use them as teachable moments instead of scaring them away.
Yeah, because you want to keep that openness. You want them to be able to come to you with that stuff. And if you start like kind of hitting them hard with it every time they come, they're not going to come to you. So there's a amount of freedom that you want to allow them to have to come to you with things. And that's huge. I mean, that's extremely huge, and you have no idea how big that is. I'm actually in the process, of writing my my second book, and it's going to be about fatherhood. And just thinking about some of the statistics, surrounding fatherless homes. Like 90% of girls that are in prison come from fatherless homes. Almost 100% of runaway females come from fatherless homes. I think it's 75 to 80% of all men in prison come from fatherless homes. I can go on and on and on and on. The impact of fatherlessness that fatherlessness has on our society and on the world. And it's so important.
Statistically speaking, while you're saying, and not to detract from others, but the impact of a fatherless home in most cases is more severe than a motherless home. Not to take anything away from mothers, but studies have actually demonstrated that. And
absolutely.
So when we minimize the impact that we have as fathers, we're taking away something that's very critical and very vital in our society. And I believe that we really need to be cognizant of the impact that we have, and don't allow the world to strip that from us, because when you take the father out of the home, it is devastating, absolutely
It's
devastating.
devastating. Dude, I believe that I believe that was Satan's ultimate plan, was to separate the fathers from the home. Because when he does that, it destroys the family unit. And once the family unit is destroyed, we have no concept on what that looks like and what that means. And at the end of this thing, we're going to be one big family in heaven, with God the Father as our Father. So Satan wants to destroy that picture in our minds and in our hearts, and
You were
that's
I was in the Marine Corps. We train in war. What do? We take out their leaders. And what do you do when you take out the leader? You disorganize those troops. And if we're going back in history, when you cut the head off the snake, a lot of times they lay their arms down.
Yep.
And they don't want to fight anymore. And
Right.
when you take that father and that head of that house out of there, you create chaos. Now you create an environment where that leader, that stability, that strength, that pillar's gone. And now what do you have? You have the people that were never supposed to support that foundation trying to hold it up, while
Exactly.
also playing their role in that relationship. And it does not function that way.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. And hey, and just to prove that point, statistically, um, when the mother is saved in the house and no one else is, I believe it's like somewhere around 70% of the time the house gets saved. When the children are saved in the house and no one else, and the mother and father aren't, it's like 75% of the time the other family gets saved. When the father is saved in the house, 90% of the time the whole house gets saved. So, I mean, it's a huge, huge impact that the father has on the household and on the family. And you're right; it's not taking anything away from the women. And the women, believe me, I give the women the credit, because thank God for our mothers. Because it had not been for our mothers, there would be no generation. Because fathers have just kind of left a lot of the kids alone and left them for the to fend on their own. And their mothers have stepped in and taken up the role, which, like you said, now you have, someone holding up a foundation that never should be holding up a foundation, and that's a powerful realization, and so I believe that we're in a time in history where God is calling the fathers back, and here's the thing. I truly believe, because I look at my relationship with my daughters. I have Ashley, who's about to turn 30, and I have Eliana, who's 2. So, and with Ashley, there was a point of strain, in our relationship. And a lot of guys, I just blew it. I'm never going to be able to rebuild that relationship with my son or my daughter again. But that's not true. With God, all things are possible, and He's good at repairing broken things. You know,
Absolutely. And
yeah,
it's on
yeah,
us as fathers to reestablish those relationships and be able to have those hard conversations. I've had conversations with I will fully admit right on the show that with my 2 stepsons, I did not know, I was not prepared to step into that role. And I did a lot of things wrong, and I caused a lot of issues with them. And I had to take a step back and say, I'm sorry. I know that I didn't handle those situations the way that I could have, should have, and I would now, as a man, as a role model, as a father figure, and as the person that you were looking to, whether you realized it or not.
amen,
And
amen.
having those difficult conversations, you can absolutely change somebody's life. And they might look at you and tell you they don't want to talk to you, or they don't like you, or they hate you, or whatever the case may be. But that conversation will start something within them that may not manifest for a while, but it absolutely will lay the foundation for something in the future. I'd be willing to bet my next paycheck on it.
I'm 1,000% in agreement with you. And you're right. Yeah, we as fathers have to own up. You know what I mean, to our mistakes, and own up to our mistakes with our children. I had to do that with my daughter Ashley. I had to sit down and go, you know what, Ashley, I was wrong. I was in the wrong place, wrong state of mind. I was wrong. But I'm here right now, and I want to make this better, and I'm willing to do whatever that takes because I love you. You know,
And
and that
that
usually
also
comes
shows how to have that difficult conversation for themselves as well. Because
exactly.
a lot, what does it show them when we turn and we run out? That shows them that running away from problems solves them. But when
Amen.
you stand in there in the storm and you meet it head on and you look them in the eye and you have that difficult conversation and the tears fall, and they will. And now they understand what that moment feels like, and they understand
Amen.
what that moment looks like. And now they'll be able to look somebody in the eye and say, I didn't make the best decision there. And I have to own that because that's my responsibility to you.
Amen.
And because I love you,
So true.
I'm here and I'm willing to look
So
you in the
true.
eye, have this conversation because of what's in my heart and how much I love you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey man, look, we're out of time, man. But it was an awesome conversation. I gotta have you back on, bro, and continue this conversation because there's a whole lot more that we can dig into. But I appreciate you coming out to the Rally Point, man. I know that those listening, I hope that they received a lot because there's a lot of good stuff that was said here tonight, man. Thanks for coming on the Rally Point, bro.
Thanks for having me, Pastor West. It's a pleasure. Anytime, I'm here for you, brother.
Hey man, any last words? Last thoughts?
Again, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present.
Woo! You heard it. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. My man Dan Whitted. Dan, we'll see ya. And hey, that was Dan Whitted, and he was on the Rally Point, and we're just so thankful for you guys coming in. Continue to come in, continue to watch as you get fed, as you get resupplied, so that you can go back out into the battle and be successful. Again, I'm Pastor West, and you have been to the Rally Point. God bless you, and we'll see you again.